I took a deep breath, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the cold door handle to my CEO's office. My heart was pounding like a drum solo against my ribs. I walked in, and before I could chicken out, I said the words I'd been choking on for 3 agonizing months. "I've been dreaming about you." I was bracing for a super private, deeply awkward conversation, maybe even a one-way ticket to HR. What I got instead was a company-wide spectacle that went viral and changed absolutely everything. Before we get to the fireworks, you need to picture the pressure cooker I was working in. The company was called Tech Solutions, a name that screamed bright future, but really masked a relentlessly soul-crushing reality. On the surface, we were the darlings of the tech world. Our office was a temple of what I call corporate chic, open-plan layouts, beanbag chairs that looked cool but nobody ever sat in, and a kombucha tap that was always, and I mean always, empty. We'd get featured in magazines for our dynamic culture and flat hierarchy, but that was all a carefully curated lie. The truth? Tech was a battlefield dressed up as a playground. The culture was less dynamic and more survival of the fittest. It was the kind of place where acting your wage was a career death sentence, and burnout was seen as a badge of honor. We were constantly told to innovate, disrupt, and break molds, but the invisible rules were rigid and totally unforgiving. The pressure was just immense, this constant low level of anxiety you could feel everywhere. You were just expected to answer emails at 10 p.m., to volunteer for weekend projects, and to treat your job less like a career and more like a high-stakes religious calling. It was the kind of place that breeds 2 types of people, the ones who thrive on the constant adrenaline and the ones who are slowly being ground into dust. I was definitely in that second category. At the very top of this whole universe was our CEO, Mr. Alistair Sterling. He was practically a myth, a guy we rarely saw outside of quarterly all-hands meetings. He'd stride onto the stage like a rock star and give these passionate speeches about changing the world, one algorithm at a time. He was charismatic, always impeccably dressed, and had a smile that could charm the cynicism right out of you. But he was also completely distant, like a painting you admire from afar, hanging in a corner office on the top floor. We all knew of him, but none of us really knew him. He was the sun we all orbited, and his gravity dictated our every move. He wasn't just a boss, he was the architect of our stress and the final judge of our success or failure. My direct supervisor, however, was a woman named Violet. If Mr. Sterling was the distant sun, Violet was a black hole parked right at my desk, sucking all the light and air out of my work life. She was a middle manager who had clawed her way up by shamelessly taking credit for other people's work and building a little empire of fear. She was the walking, talking embodiment of Tech's toxic side. Violet would praise you in a meeting, then 2 hours later send a blistering email picking apart every tiny thing you supposedly did wrong. She even invented something she called project disaster parties, where she'd project the financials of a failed project on a giant screen and publicly mock the team responsible. She pitched it to upper management as a tool for radical accountability. It was just brutal and humiliating. My job title was Senior Data Analyst, and I was good at it. I genuinely loved finding the stories hidden in the numbers, connecting the dots no one else could see. But under Violet's reign, my passion had curdled into pure anxiety. She'd constantly question my data, undermine my presentations, and helpfully rerun my analyses, always finding some tiny, irrelevant error to call out. Complaining was useless. She was a master of office politics, and she'd frame any complaint as you being unable to handle constructive feedback. This never-ending stress, the feeling of being constantly watched and undermined, started to leak into my subconscious. And that's when the dreams began. They weren't romantic or scandalous, not like you're probably thinking. They were just pure, uncut stress dreams.
In them, I was always in some surreal version of the office, trying to present a critical report to Mr. Sterling himself. But something would always go horribly wrong. The numbers on my slides would start squirming like snakes, the projector would literally melt, my voice would just disappear. And in every single one of these nightmares, Violet would be standing right behind Mr. Sterling, smiling her smug, satisfied smile. The dreams became a nightly thing, with Mr. Sterling always at the center, not as a villain, but as the silent, powerful judge of my inevitable screw-up. Psychologically, I guess it made sense. He was the ultimate symbol of the power and pressure I was drowning under. The dreams were my brain's way of screaming about the tension I couldn't resolve at work. I'd wake up with my jaw clenched, my heart racing, feeling even tireder than when I went to sleep. The stress was becoming unbearable. I was losing focus at work, making dumb mistakes that Violet would pounce on with glee. I felt completely trapped. I tried everything to make them stop. Meditation, cutting out caffeine, journaling, nothing worked. After 3 months of this nightly mental torture, I finally hit my breaking point. I was sleep-deprived, riddled with anxiety, and just plain desperate. In my exhausted, totally irrational state of mind, a wild idea started to form. What if I just told him? What if I blew past the corporate red tape and just laid it all out there? The logic was fuzzy, born from pure desperation. Maybe, just maybe, if I confessed this bizarre, embarrassing problem, the dreams would stop. It was a Hail Mary, a cry.
That 60 minutes I spent in Alistair Sterling's office was the most surreal and tense hour of my life. I just sat there in one of his ridiculously plush leather chairs, feeling completely out of place, while he paced back and forth in front of the window, a silent, coiled spring of energy. He didn't talk to me at all. He was on his phone, his voice a low, intense murmur, firing off texts and making short, cryptic calls. I caught snippets of phrases like, "activate the protocol," and "yes, the catalyst is here," and "have legal on standby." It sounded less like a CEO prepping for a meeting and more like a general about to launch an invasion. My mind was just a tornado of confusion and absolute terror. What did I do? A catalyst? A protocol? I came in here with a bizarre personal sob story, expecting to be quietly shown the door, and instead I've somehow triggered a corporate earthquake. Every worst-case scenario I could dream up was playing on a loop in my head. Was he going to make an example out of me? Was mandatory meeting just code for public firing? The thought of being humiliated in front of everyone, maybe even in a style like Violet's own Project Disaster parties, made my stomach clench. They say sharing personal details at work can backfire, and I felt like I'd just lit the fuse on a bomb that was about to blow my career to pieces. Meanwhile, I could feel the shockwaves of his meeting announcement ripping through the building. My phone, which I'd silenced, was vibrating non-stop on the table next to me. The team chat had to be a dumpster fire of speculation. What was this about? Why now? Why non-negotiable? All hands meetings weren't new, but one called with an hour's notice and a mandatory attendance rule? That was unheard of. It screamed crisis. Sterling finally ended his last call and turned his full attention back to me. The calm, almost detached vibe was back. "How are you feeling, Alex?" he asked, like he was asking about the weather. "Terrified," I admitted, my voice just a hoarse whisper. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Fear is a powerful motivator. It's also a powerful poison. It seems we have a lot of it in this company." He sat down in the chair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. For the first time, he didn't feel like the mythical CEO from the stage. He was just a man. A very powerful one, sure, looking at me with this unnerving intensity. "Alex, I'm going to be straight with you because you were straight with me. I've known for a long time that Innovatech has a problem, a deep one. Our culture has become toxic. We celebrate results, but we crush our people. We reward the loudest voices, not the best ideas. We've built a machine that is slowly grinding down the very people who make it run." He paused, looking out at the city below. I've been looking for a way to fix it, but you can't just send a memo and change a company's culture. It doesn't work. You need a moment, a turning point, something that exposes the rot so clearly that nobody can ignore it. He looked back at me, his blue eyes locking onto mine. Your confession, Alex, your dreams, they weren't just a sign of your personal stress. They were a symptom of the sickness in this entire company. You dreaming about failing in front of me, with your manager standing right there. It's the perfect, tragic metaphor for everything wrong with Innovatech. I was just stunned into silence. He wasn't dismissing me. He was validating me. He was seeing my personal crisis as a mirror of a corporate one. What I'm about to do, his voice dropped a little, is going to be disruptive. It's going to be uncomfortable. People are going to be shocked. And I'm putting you at the center of it, which is why I'm telling you this now. I'm not going to let you be the victim in this story. You're the one who had the courage to speak up, even if you didn't realize you were doing it. You're the whistleblower. Before I could even process that, Sarah's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Sterling, it's time." Sterling stood up and straightened his tie. He looked every inch the powerful CEO again. "Ready, Alex?" I was not even close, but I nodded anyway, my body moving on autopilot. I stood up on shaky legs, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. He walked to the door and held it open for me. As I stepped into the hallway, a new wave of panic washed over me. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from a work friend on my team. "OMG, Alex, Violet is losing her mind. She saw you go into Sterling's office. She's telling everyone you went over her head to complain and that Sterling is holding this meeting to fire you publicly for insubordination. She looks happy about it." My blood ran cold. Violet was already spinning the story, painting me as the villain. She was getting ready to dance on my corporate grave. As Sterling and I walked towards the executive elevators, the pieces started clicking into place. His cryptic calls, his talk of a catalyst, the fact he already knew about the toxic culture. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction. This was a planned execution. My confession hadn't given him the idea. It had given him the perfect excuse. He'd been waiting for a trigger, and I had just walked in and handed it to him on a silver platter. The elevator ride down was dead silent. Sterling stared straight ahead, his jaw set. I just stared at my own reflection in the polished steel doors, a pale, terrified ghost of the person who'd walked into work that morning. The doors opened directly into the back of the massive atrium near a hastily assembled stage. The room was packed. The entire company was there, hundreds of employees crammed together, a sea of anxious and confused faces. The air was thick with tension and whispered rumors. I saw my team huddled on one side, and right in the front row, I saw Violet. She was standing with a group of...
The moment Sterling finished speaking and the applause finally, hesitantly began, the world tilted on its axis. The applause wasn't roaring, it was tentative, uncertain, like the first few drops of rain after a long drought. People were still processing the corporate bloodbath they just witnessed. 7 managers, including the infamous Violet, fired on the spot, in public. It was the kind of thing that would become company legend. As soon as we stepped off stage, we were met by Sarah and the head of HR, a woman named Linda. Sterling gave my shoulder a final, firm squeeze. "Linda will take care of you, Alex. We'll talk tomorrow morning. Get some rest." And just like that, he was gone, swept away by a group of senior execs, his face grim but determined. Linda guided me through the stunned, parting crowds to a small, private conference room. My legs were still shaking. My brain was still a blank screen of shock. She handed me a bottle of water. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. I just shook my head, unable to speak. "I know that was a lot," she said. "Alistair's methods are unorthodox, but he wanted to make a statement that couldn't be ignored. He's been planning this cultural overhaul for months, but he was waiting for the right moment, a clear, undeniable event to justify such a drastic move. Your situation provided that." So it was true. I was just the spark that lit the fuse on a powder keg that was already there. It wasn't really about my dreams at all. It was about what they represented. The rest of the day was a total blur. I was sent home, with Linda insisting I take the rest of the week off to decompress. As I packed my bag, my teammates came up to me one by one. There were no big speeches, just quiet words. "I can't believe you did that," one said. "Thank you," said another, her eyes tearing up. They had all suffered under violence. They didn't see me as someone who had a weird breakdown. They saw me as the hero who had finally slayed the dragon. The real explosion, though, was happening online. By the time I got home, the story was already leaking. An anonymous post showed up on a popular tech industry forum. CEO at Innotech just publicly fired 7 managers in an all-hands meeting after an employee confessed to having nightmares about him. From there, it just caught fire. The post went viral. Tech bloggers picked it up, then mainstream news sites. The headline was just too juicy to ignore. My dream confession became the hook, the bizarre human detail that made the story irresistible. Journalists started digging. Anonymous sources from inside Innotech started talking, filling in the details about the toxic culture, Violet's project disaster parties, and the sheer drama of the public firings. My story, stripped of all its nuance, became a viral sensation. I was Dream Girl, the employee who brought down a toxic regime with a sleepy confession. My phone had a complete nuclear meltdown. LinkedIn requests, Facebook messages from people I hadn't talked to in years, even emails from journalists. I just turned it off. The story had taken on a life of its own, a simplified soap opera version of events that painted me as some quirky corporate revolutionary. In some ways, it was terrifying. My personal, vulnerable moment of desperation was now public property, a piece of internet lore. Strangers were debating my sanity, my professionalism, my motives. They say oversharing at work can undermine you, and my overshare was now being debated by millions. The next morning, I met with Sterling and Linda again. The vibe was totally different. Sterling looked tired, but also energized. He showed me some of the news articles. "It's bigger than I expected," he admitted. "The personal nature of your confession made it resonate, but the narrative is largely positive. We're not being seen as a company in crisis, but as a company taking bold, decisive action to fix its problems. And you, Alex, are being portrayed as a catalyst for positive change." He explained the company was leaning into it. They issued a press release confirming what happened and doubling down on their commitment to cultural reform. They didn't use my name, but they confirmed the catalyst event. They were framing it not as chaos, but as a rebirth. "I understand this is a lot for you," Sterling said, his tone empathetic. "Your privacy has been invaded, and I am truly sorry for that. We're prepared to offer you full support. Legal counsel, a communications consultant, anything you need. We can also discuss your future here. Things are going to be different for you now. The anonymity you had is gone." He was right. I wasn't just Alex, the data analyst, anymore. I was a symbol. And as the story kept spreading, I realized my quiet life was officially over. The shock was fading, replaced by the dawning, terrifying reality of what came next. This story is a wild example of how fast things can escalate in a high-pressure job. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected actions can have the most profound consequences. If you've ever felt like you were at a breaking point at work, or if you're just fascinated by what really goes on behind the scenes in the corporate world, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the stories we share here, where we break down the most dramatic,